Niv was stunned. The woman's voice was identical to the one earlier that afternoon. "This is Maeva," Sharon said. Niv stared in confusion. "Nice to meet you?" Sharon took the berries. "You two are soaking wet. Go change into dry clothes and I'll make some hot tea." Niv tried not to stare but was unable to resist her curiosity. Maeva wore a long blue gown that shimmered in the cloudy daylight peering through the kitchen window. Her long, dark hair was speckled with hints of gray and cascaded effortlessly over the luxurious fabric. She smiled when she became aware of Niv's gaze. Niv ducked into her room and changed into a clean dress, combed her hair with her fingers to remove the excess water and tangles, then returned to the main room. She laid her wet garments on the cobblestone fireplace and sat at the kitchen table. "Dinner's almost ready," Sharon said, stirring a pot on the wood-burning stove. Maeva's hands were folded neatly on the table as she closely observed Niv. "I hope your journey was pleasant," her father said. "The weather wasn't as nice as I'd hoped, but it was worth it. Niv, your eyes are even more beautiful than I remember." "As brilliant blue as the waters of Sapphire Creek," Sharon added. Niv blushed. "You don't remember me, do you?" May asked. "No, I'm sorry." "You were a little girl when you left Celandis. I told Sharon and Ren you would grow up to be a beautiful woman. My prediction was correct." "Thank you, but I've never been to Celandis," Niv replied. May glanced at Ren. "You're right, I'm sorry. My memory isn't what it used to be." "You're just tired from the trip," Ren said. May started to reply, but was interrupted by Sharon. "Have some of this lovely Elvmont tea. Niv picked the berries." Citrus-sweet aroma filled the air as Sharon filled everyone's eagerly awaiting cups. Niv took a sip, savoring the flavor and using the steam to warm her cold, wet nose. "It's been so long," Sharon said. "I'm glad you could come." "It's been too long," May replied. "I have missed you." "How are your sister and father?" "My sister is well, but my father died last winter." Sharon took May's hands in hers. "I'm sorry." Niv cradled her tea, drawing its warmth into her. She wanted to ask May a million questions, but didn't want to interrupt such a somber moment. Sharon fetched the stew and placed it on the table. "I hope you're hungry, May." "I'm starved," Jarvis exclaimed. Ren flashed Jarvis a disapproving glance. "Well, I'm sure you're hungrier than me after all that traveling," Jarvis said. May chuckled. "I am." "Here's some bread and cheese," Sharon said, "and I've got apple turnovers for dessert, so save some room." "This stew is delicious," May said. "Aren't you curious as to why you can hear me?" "No," Niv replied out loud. "No what?" Jarvis asked. Only May looked directly at Niv. "Sorry, I was thinking," Niv replied. "She's talking to me." "Yes, I was, Niv." A chill ran through Niv as she realized this was a telepathic conversation. She was unsure as to what was more disturbing, that she could hear May, or May could hear her. "Have you never experienced this before?" May asked telepathically. "I don't know." Niv wondered if May could hear all of her thoughts. "I wish May would hand me another piece of bread." She waited a moment, then was relieved May wasn't aware of her inner dialogue. Niv directed her thoughts towards May. "Please hand me another piece of bread." "Certainly." She expected May to reach for the bread, but instead May asked out loud, "Would anyone like another piece?" "I would," Jarvis said with a mouthful of stew. May looked at Niv. "Wouldn't it look strange if I gave you bread that you did not ask for?" "Me too, please," Niv said out loud. After dinner, Ren and Jarvis fed May's horses in the barn. Then Jarvis excused himself and went to his room. Niv's parents and May asked that she join them at the table. "Your father and I have some things we need to discuss with you," Sharon said. "It's never good when someone says they need to talk to you before they actually do," Niv said. "You have nothing to worry about, dear." Niv relaxed her posture. "I'm not worried, but I do want to know what's going on." "I promise we'll explain everything." She stared at the familiar voice. Her mother? Now she was hearing her mother? One glance confirmed that her mother hadn't said a word out loud. Anxiety heightened as she waited for an explanation. How had she not known about this before? "There are things we haven't told you," Sharon said. "But there's nothing to be afraid of. May and I are old friends. She helped take care of you when you were a baby." "You never told me I lived in Celandis." "Why did you lie?" Niv asked. "Your mother and I used to live there," Ren said. "We moved here when you were an infant." "Why would you keep this from me?" Niv asked. Sharon put her hand on Niv's shoulder. "I was in the Order of the Alchemy." Niv pulled away. "What?" She crossed her arms as if to shield herself from the shock as she absorbed her mother's words. This can't be true. I assure you it is. Niv's knowledge of the Alchemy was limited to her books and lessons in school. They were highly educated and trained spiritual leaders, enlightened masters who held no political authority. If you were in the Alchemy, why do we not live in Celandis? Niv asked. When we moved to the Jeweled Woods, we wanted you to have a normal life, to grow up like all the other children. That would have been impossible had we stayed in Celandis, and I remained in the Order. Niv knew she was right. Children of parents in the Alchemy were sheltered and often trained to be members themselves. Why are you telling me this now? Why is this a secret? Even if I had known you were in the Order, I could have lived a normal life in the woods. Had you known, it would have changed everything, Sharon said. This way, you were free to make your own choices. I would have still made the same choices, Niv said. I'm not going to be swayed by what other people think I should become. The pressure would have been enormous, Ren said. We wanted you to grow up without that in a safe environment. Niv's arms fell limp at her side as she looked out the window. The rain had slowed, leaving only small droplets sliding down the panes. Her parents' sacrifice had kept her safe, but also in the dark. I always wanted to visit Celandis. I thought it was part of my desire to see the world. Perhaps I remember it. What do you want to do with your life, Niv? May asked. I'm not sure, Niv replied. I don't think I'm ready to start a family. I love reading, writing, and learning as much as I can. I want to see all the places I've read about. There's a strong tradition of the children of the Alchemy joining the Order, May said. You could learn a lot from them. I'm not sure that's for me. My mother was in the Order as well, Sharon said. Well, was it because you wanted to, or because you thought you had to, Niv asked. A little of both, I think, but I didn't regret it. Then why did you leave? Niv asked. We were going to stay, but we decided against it after you were born, Sharon replied. We wanted to avoid the influences of the city. This didn't have to be a secret. I'm an adult. I can handle the truth. May smiled. Niv, parents will always think of their children as young kids, no matter how old they are. We understand, Sharon said. We should have told you. I need to be alone with my thoughts for now. Please excuse me. Of course, dear, Sharon replied. It was nice meeting you, May. Likewise. You have grown into a fine young woman. Thank you. Have a good night. Sharon followed Niv to the doorway of her room. I'm sorry we didn't tell you the truth. We were trying to protect you. I'm glad May spoke out of turn, or else I might have never found out. We'll talk more tomorrow, Sharon replied. Then Niv closed the door. Sharon returned to Ren and May. Her hand trembled on the table. I've dreaded that for years. You were afraid of telling her she was born in Celandis? May asked. Sharon and Ren looked at each other. The thought of telling her everything became more intimidating as she grew older. Sharon, this isn't fair to her, May said, then paused to carefully consider her words. She's been denied the chance to find out who she is. She must have many questions. A few things have come up, but we've handled them, Sharon replied. She spends lots of time alone in the woods. May took a deep breath and leaned back in her chair. I know this is hard, and I know you want to keep her safe. That's always been our highest priority, Ren said. I respect the sacrifice you made more than you'll ever know, May replied, but how could you have let the time slip away so easily? Sharon started to tear. How do you tell your child something like that? You just do, and do it as soon as possible, May said. Please let us be the ones to tell her, Ren implored. I owe you that, May replied, but I won't leave until you tell her everything. You just listened to Chapter 2 of the book Niv'leana, the first book in the Sign of Alchemy series, available on Kindle and in print on Amazon. Please check the description for the link, and be sure to subscribe as I'll be reading the entire book on YouTube. Until next time, be well.